Alright, so what I have here is a PGO-7V, as you see right here, sight. These are early sights from the RPG-7 line of launchers. Pretty basic little device. You've got the lenses going up through here. So you got your end there, you've got a nice little soft cushioning part for your eye. Often you see them with a forehead piece that you could lean your forehead on, just in case there's some sort of a little bit of kick due to not cleaning your launcher properly, or something just doesn't come out the back properly. It makes it more stable also for you when you're aiming. These are not the original ones, I guess you would call them. We normally have a battery backpack here and a switch here. I'm assuming this means on and off, but I didn't look it up, so I can't really tell you. Either way, they switched it out for a rechargeable battery pack that you could click into the space here. So this has a little plastic thing attached to the other part that looks like this in here, except with the male part clicks into here, and you've got the part that clicks into here. You got positive and negative, or negative and positive. I don't know which one's which, but it doesn't really change anything the way this thing works. So anyways, that's why you get all these holes in here. The other one, that would be the battery pack, and then switch it over to here. You'd have the two wires coming out of here and going back through the hole here, back up through here, one here, one here. This one here, like I said, they got rid of it, so it's positive and negative. The whole thing's grounded, and then you got the positive wire going through here. It runs off of a 3-volt system, and I'll remove the light bulb for you, which is what I'm doing here. Bring it closer, and that's a little light bulb for it. If you ever burn one of these out, technically, as I said, it's 3 volts, so diodes will actually work the same way, the LEDs, so you can just replace it with an LED. What else you have on here is obviously the way to mount it to your launcher. So much like the AK ones, if anyone's ever handled those. If you haven't handled those, well, you're probably Canadian, or anyways. Your next thing is here, which is just a zeroing knob you get on the scope, just in case it's not quite where it's supposed to be. Lastly, on this model here, and you see them on most, well, probably all of them, you've got the plus here and a minus here. If it's above freezing, you have it on plus. If it's below freezing, you put it on minus. It just moves the sight a little bit upward and a little bit down to make up for the fact that in cold weather, your rocket and your booster charge is less, I wouldn't say efficient, but there's less pressure in that created by it. If it gets warm, it will actually put more energy out than if it's cold, and therefore the minus brings up the sight so that you have to lean it up, well, brings it down, so you have to bring the launcher up a little bit, and the positive brings it back up, so you have to bring the sight back down a little bit. Very little movement in it. I just checked it before, and if you could keep it still, you could tell that there's a little bit of movement, but I wouldn't say it's more than a couple of mils. Anyways, these sights are everywhere I read them, it's between 2.5 and 2.8 times. So when you're looking through it, and I'll show you now quickly how to use the sight itself. Alright, So bear with me with this thing here because it's going to be a little bit difficult to keep on here. But that's a picture of an M60 tank that I have on the wall over there, well, on the door. And what you do in order to sight it in, this was the tank that was around when they came up with the sight. So it's measured at about 2.7 meters high. That's just the top of the actual cupola, or whatever you want to call them. So it's a little bit movement. I'm holding this thing up with my hands. Anyways, so what you do is you line it up to the lags on the bottom of the line there, and then you make it so that it's up to the cupola itself, the top of it. And in that case, it is 2.7 meters, which means if we're putting it up, we'll see right there next to the person. According to this, it would be about 350 meters away. So if it's 350 meters away, you got the lines, horizontal lines are all sitting there. And that's in 100 meter increments. So you got 200, 300, 400, and 500. And then you've got 10 mil increments at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, going the opposite way there. So what you would do is you'd set it up at about 350, which would be about here. And then you'd be able to fire if it wasn't moving. And you'd be able to hit the tank. The double lines you see going across at 300 is where you have about a 50% hit rate with an RPG. That's what they expected from it, and that's what you're supposed to be getting from it. So in this case, if I set it up like that, I'd have less than a 50% chance of actually hitting that tank, even if it was sitting still, with a rocket, supposedly. Like I said, there's not much, I can't really read Russian too well, so I had to go with the American translated ones. And that's what they say. The double line is for a chance to actually hit 50% of the time. Other thing about this is I could go over the sight itself. As I said, what I was using there is a scale to give you a range. So it goes from 200 meters to 1,000 meters away. Then you've got the actual place where you put the ranging on it. This sight is only for the PG-7 rockets, PG-7V or whatever it's called. And those are the ones that are the anti-tank ones. What I've got lined up on the tank right now is actually just a mark for bore sighting. When you install this on the tube, you look directly through the bore and you aim it at an object. And this little cross here is supposed to line up with the object that you've bore sighted with, just so you sort of know where you're supposed to be shooting. Just make sure it's right. And then you could probably just zero it with the dial on there. So one thing you have to do is when you're talking about leading them, say the tank at the top was moving, you always have to give lead like that, because it's moving in that direction there. So depending on how fast it's actually moving at, you would have to give it more or less lead. Now say the wind, for example, was going, so you had a wind blowing from right to left. Anyone who shoots guns and other things would assume that, okay, it's going from right to left, so it's going to blow my bullet or whatever I'm shooting to the left. So most people would actually say, okay, if I was firing here and the tank was stopped, I would miss it because the wind's blowing it that way. With an RPG-7, while the rocket's actually burning, it's going to go against the wind. It's going to shuttlecock into the wind, and the rocket's going to keep firing in the other direction. So it's counterproductive, or counterintuitive, should I say? But you would have to aim that way, away from the wind, so that it actually turns into it, and it'll actually go towards the tank like that. I'm not going to get into how much you're supposed to do, because depending on distances, depending on rocket flight and wind, you're going to have to place in a different spot, which makes it a difficult launcher to use. Another important thing to know when you're aiming with these things is that the scale on there, like you saw, is for a target that has 2.7 meters in height. That means if the tank is taller than that, you're going to be aiming low. I think so, at least. And if it's shorter than that, you're going to be aiming high, because if it's shorter than that, it's going to look like it's supposed to be out. Instead of 350 like you saw in this one here, it would be more out towards a 400. So you will get slight differences. If it's taller, it'll look like it's actually closer, so you will fire and hit lower. Something to think about if you play any of the realistic combat games. Most people don't have to worry about it in real life. But I guess if you're actually able to use one of these things in Cambodia or whatever, and you want to hit your target, it's probably a good idea to actually take that into account. So remember, if the target's taller than what you see on that site, you're going to have to aim higher. If it's shorter than 2.7 meters, you're going to have to aim lower. Alright, so if you're in a really low light situation, you would hit the battery switch and you get a thing looking like this. So even in the evening, you would get some sort of a sight picture. I can't do it in the house right now because it's too bright, so you can't even see the difference. So I just put the cap on and you sort of see this now. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, comments, please leave them below. There will be other videos sort of in the series, because I'm going to try to use this with my subcal unit. Jerry rig it somehow to get it together. And try to hit a few targets with it. Unfortunately, like I said, it is a 200-meter start on it, so I'd have to still aim low at most places I'm going to be able to shoot it. So that's a little bit of a problem, but it doesn't matter. We'll see how it goes from there. Thanks for watching, and I'll have more videos out soon.